would you consider your Steelpan hero or heroes? Which steel band would you say is your favorite steel band in the world? In terms of my own personal heroes, there are three people that I can ideally identify as having developed me as a Steelpan musician and teacher, the person that I am today. Although, of course, many other people who I've been involved with in the music arena and in music in general have also contributed to my development. But the first person that I can name, and may her soul rest in peace, he recently passed away and left us, is Mrs. Vivian Haxley. She was my music teacher at school, and she is the reason why the school had started the steel band program, with which I still say today, if it hadn't been for her, I probably would not be involved in steel band activities at all if she hadn't started this. And she had been my teacher up to grade 12, where she had taught me formal music theory and harmony, and also music history. So a lot of my musical knowledge has come from her in terms of the theory work that I can do. In terms of playing and the instrument itself, so the steel band at the school was started with Vivian Haxley, but also with Steve Laurie, who at that time was the only person making steel band instruments in the country. So he was then put in charge of teaching the bands, and he also was the person who then tutored us on playing solo music. So he's been probably the biggest inspiration to me when it comes to Steelpan. What he has achieved is inspiring for me, and although I only had about 4 years of in-person contact with him, it has been lasting. The inspiration that he's given me to continue what I'm doing today. His knowledge on the instrument, the making and tuning of the instrument, his knowledge on writing music and arranging music is something that he has passed on to me, and that has kept me going for the duration of my time as a Steelpan teacher and as an arranger and performer. And then thirdly, the third person I would like to identify here is Professor Andrew Tracy. He was the first person to initially bring the instrument to South Africa, and after I finished my grade 12 schooling career or year, I had the privilege to participate and be part of the Andrew Tracy Steel Band. He had invited me the year after I finished in 2000. I matriculated or completed my grade 12, and in 2001, while I was working at the Pan Master Steel Band Services, making and tuning instruments, Andrew Tracy approached me to be part of the band, at which I said without a doubt, and I played bass play. I was the bass player for about 2 or 3 years in the band, and then I moved on to playing some double tenor and lead with the band. But he has been an inspiration to me. His knowledge of arranging and of culture and steel band music, his knowledge of African music is unbelievable. So yeah, those three people have been a big inspiration for me, and they have passed on a lot of their knowledge onto me. How would you describe Steve Laurie? Describe your relationship with him, his impact and contributions to the Steelpan world, in the country and internationally. Share one or more experiences that Steve is known for, or any story involving him. Walk through the years in which you have worked with him in pan building and your motivation to stop and pursue your studies. My initial contact with Steve Laurie started in 1996, obviously when I joined the steel band program at school, And Steve is a remarkable person when it comes to Steelpan. What he has developed over the years in terms of the tuning technique, the building technique, you can't get better than what he's producing. The instruments is of world quality, international. He is the sole reason why steel bands exist in South Africa or across South Africa, because he was the person who had initially spread them and sold the instruments or made the instruments that are spread across the country. My relationship with him is that he's like a friend, he's like a big brother to me. He always has been. Although I've only had 4 years of in-person contact with him, his inspiration on me I can't even put it in words how much he has inspired me and how he still inspires me to strive to be the best that I am. His friendliness, his kind mannerisms that he has, and his openness. When I was in grade 9 and had joined the band for the main school band, I had approached him and inquired from him how is the Steelpan made, and my initial inquiry was mostly about why there were so many different variations and Steelpan layouts for the various instruments. And this led to him actually explaining to me the history of the instrument and how the various tuners had developed their own layouts, which led me to start collecting Steelpan layouts, of which I now have over 300 different Steelpan layouts from various sources. And at the end of grade 9, he invited me to actually learn how to make the instrument. So I spent my summer vacation, school vacation, with him, working in his workshop, in which he also showed me the techniques involved that he had known of making the instrument and how the tuning works, the complications with tuning and overtones on the notes, all the difficulties that go with that. So from there, I know he stayed with me until I completed my grade 12 practical exam on Steelpan, after which he left. He immigrated to the US and started working at Panyard Incorporated. Over there, he developed the instrument, the technique of making the instrument to become one of the best instruments in the world in his hands. His techniques are unbelievable that he uses, and hopefully he will get recognized for the developments that he has created over the last 20 years. The quality of instruments that he's producing is unmatched by anyone else, I know. And his knowledge on tuning is unbelievable. Some of the best memories that I have of Steve was his kindness. Through him, I was able to go and watch the Andy Narelle performance, the very first Andy Narelle performance in South Africa. He was kind enough to actually buy the ticket for me and even organize my travel and accommodation arrangements, which is something I will repay to him one day. So after I had finished grade 12, or at the end of that grade 12 year when Steve actually immigrated, he also he asked me about making Steelpan and what my ambitions were after school. And I said at that point that I didn't have any ambitions, I didn't have any real idea of where I was going when I finished school. And he then approached me and asked me if I wouldn't want to continue making Steelpan in his workshop, which he had passed over to one of my former steel band friends in the band who had also finished school and had taken over ownership of the workshop, Handmaster Steel Band Services. The guy was Steven van Onselen. And so we worked together during the 2001 year, and at the end of that year I had already joined Andrew Tracy's steel band, which then inspired me further to stop, not totally stop, I still continued making or working with Steven during my studies, but I stopped and I had registered to study music at Rhodes University here in Makhanda, Grahamstown, from 2002. And during that time I still went to the workshop and would work on certain days, but not continuously, only on certain, when times when they were very busy, they would call me to come and assist. Walk us through your college Steelpan years. How was your experience being one of the only Steelpan students? Who was your Steelpan supervisor? Describe the typical lessons and syllabi methods that you had. So when I registered to study a Bachelor of Music at Rhodes University, my supervisor was Andrew Tracy, Professor Andrew Tracy. And initially we didn't really have set instrumental lessons, music lessons. I would perform for him once in a while, but basically he said to develop myself, I need to do research on performance pieces and present that to him. What he did help me on was arranging techniques. So most of our lessons were spent on arranging and getting techniques of harmony and balance in ensembles. So a lot of the knowledge that he had about arranging he passed on to me. And in terms of playing of the instrument for the practical or instrumental studies exams, I would prepare my own pieces, present them to him in designated lessons, at which he would then help me improve them and make changes to them. And then we would then go and present these in an examination. But most of the lessons that we had were focused on arranging. And so a lot of the knowledge that I have about arranging comes from him. His technique of arranging has been passed on to me, although I have made my own changes and developed my own techniques of arranging as well. So who is Andrew Tracy and how would you describe him? Would you say Andrew Tracy is the first person to bring Steelpan in South Africa? When was this? Tell us the story behind Andrew Tracy and his contributions and narrative in him instigating the birth and development of the Steelpan in the country. So Andrew Tracy, by trade, is an ethnomusicologist. He has got a vast knowledge of South or Sub-Saharan African music, specifically music from Zimbabwe, which he had studied and researched quite a lot. His initial exposure to the Steelpan came when he was performing in a musical called Wait a Minimum, which he was performing with his brother Paul Tracy. And the cast were in London when he heard a steel band perform at one of the restaurants. And this grabbed his attention because he liked the sound of the instrument to the point where he eventually purchased a set of instruments to use in the musical Wait a Minimum. And eventually when Wait a Minimum finished its run and Andrew Tracy returned to South Africa, he started up the first steel band in South Africa. This would be around 1969, 1970. and he then performed at various festivals, various events across the country with various groups. So he had various members pass through his band over the decades that he had, going from about 1970. The band existed until about 2005, 2006. And various members of Steelpan members passed through, many of them being students at university that he had worked with. One of these people that I know of was Steve Laurie. While he was at school, he was exposed to the steel band as a result of his father being part of the band, Mike Laurie. And then this is where Steve's inquiry came about how the instrument was made and making his own instruments. So Andrew Tracy brought the first set of instruments to South Africa in the early 70s and had the only band for about 20 years. So once Steve Laurie had started making or learning to make really good quality instruments and established his own business, he started setting up bands or getting bands started in various schools and youth programs across the country. Today, I think many of those bands still exist, but the difficulty has been having a regular tuner to maintain the instruments. South Africa has had difficulties with this for a number of years now, and there's still only probably one tuner in the country, which is an area that could be improved. How have you seen, met or played with Andy Norell? When was this? Describe your experience, event, and what that meant to you. Describe Andy's personality and his impact on the promotion of Steelpan, on promoting Steelpan, jazz Steelpan in the country. So Andy Norell is very well known in South Africa. Even before the first steel bands in the schools were initiated, jazz clubs and jazz enthusiasts in the country were listening to his music through recordings. Of course, with the sanctions in the country, it was very difficult to obtain these, but his music became very popular amongst the people, the local people in South Africa, the townships, especially in the townships that enjoy jazz. And the first time I met Andy Norell or saw him was at a performance in Cape Town at the Baxter Theatre, which I had the privilege of being sponsored by to see by Steve Laurie, who had paid for my ticket, arranged my transport and accommodation. And in Cape Town, we also had a workshop with Andy Norell. That was the first contact I had with him. This was in September 1999. The next time that I met Andy Norell was in 2002, and this was the first time he came to Grahamstown, Makhanda, to come do workshops with school bands, the local school bands here, and then we performed at a mass performance with him at the university in Port Elizabeth. That was in also around August, September 2002. I have seen him perform many times. I've had the privilege of performing with him on a number of occasions. In 2012, I had the privilege of sitting with him in discussion and talking about various developments that he was working on when he had stayed and visited Andrew Tracy during the National Arts Festival, which is held in July here in Makhanda, South Africa, Grahamstown. And then in 2017, again, I had the privilege of sitting and talking to him in discussion At that stage, he was talking to me about the latest developments that he had started, which was developing the sounds for the instrument that can be exported as MIDI, the real sounds to Steelpan, which was busy recording. So Andy Norell, as a person, he's very friendly. He's very kind as well. He's always open to developing the instrument, and he has done so across the world. Seeing him perform with various universities, bands, and with various school bands shows that he has a keen interest on developing the instrument, especially amongst the youth, which is something that he can be praised for. His knowledge of Steelpan, his knowledge for jazz, and including Steelpan in the jazz arena is amazing. He's an inspiration to many performing artists, especially the young artists that are coming up. For many years, he was one of the only persons in South Africa that you could look at, and his inspiration or his knowledge has been passed on down to many other musicians and Steelpan musicians that are now starting to develop their own styles.